Welcome back, everyone, to the second installment of Massive Month. I'm your host, Josh Scar, joined by two co-hosts this week. We have Matt. Welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Can't complain. We're talking more Massiveverse stuff, so it's just going to be more massively awesome stuff. We are also joined by John again. John, welcome back. You're still on mute again.
Thank you. Great to be here. I'm glad I'm still bringing the issues with operating a computer.
Well, at least you didn't concuss yourself again this time.
Yeah, I'm getting slowly better.
And the reason we are here talking with the co-creator, is it co-creator or is it creator of The Dead Lucky, Melissa?
Always co-creator, because we share credits with our artists. We are nothing without our artists, so even if we write the stories, it's just a bunch of scripts until those artists draw them. But hi, how are you guys?
We are joined by Melissa Flores. So I appreciate that clarification, because it makes sense to me that the writer and artist would share credit, but sometimes Stanley doesn't share the credit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to call anybody out or anything on that, but I personally am a big, again, I can't draw for crap. So the only reason I am able to work in comics is because I have amazing artists who draw what I write. And and they deserve to be co-creators. Even if the story comes from me, they're the ones that are creating it on the page and bringing it to life. So if it's a creator-owned book, chances are I will be a co-creator. It is rare that I will not share that credit. And if that day comes, it's probably for some incredible reason, like I suddenly learned how to draw.
Or you really hate the artist.
Yeah. In which case, I don't know why he'd even be on, or that she would even be on the book, or whoever it is.
So among your credits for things that you are doing right now, you have been writing Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for Boom Studios.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
It was announced at San Diego Comic-Con that you're also going to be writing a Spider-Gwen miniseries, four-issue miniseries. Yep. Spider-Gwen on tour, which I do have questions about. We're going to talk kind of the whole breadth of your current roster of work. And of course, we spoke briefly, or we spoke a while ago about The Dead Lucky, and you're back to talk more about BB and her place in the Massiveverse, and can't be more excited to get into it. But the first question we always ask our guests is, what you doing? What do you do when you're not stressed about deadlines and other things involving your work? What helps you relieve that stress?
I don't know if there has been anything. No. So there's two things that have actually been really terrible for me because it's killed my productivity. The first one is there's a content creator on YouTube called Swoop, who does his incredible true crime and influencer documentaries. And I just have fallen down the Swoop rabbit hole and just watching everything. And I keep kidding myself being like, I'll just listen while I work. And it just does not work that way. So there's that. And also I've been trying to get into Starfield, but it has been slow going for me. Like I want to love it, but I'm having a hard time and I don't know why. But
that seems to be the case for Bethesda games in my experience. Is once you get past like the tutorial phase, it's like everyone's favorite thing ever, but you got to get through that, like create a character and the tutorial stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I went through all that. I'm like, I have to say, like I said, it just killed my productivity. I'm like, what, 20 hours in? I got way past I finally figured out how to do my first outpost, and I have my companion, and I've been through all the space and everything. But for some reason, it's just not. Like Fallout 4, I was in it. I was ready. And I think I cracked it. I think it was Fallout 4. You immediately knew your tragedy, what was happening to you, and what you wanted, what you had to do, right? Like you had to get your son back, and you had lost your husband. And that was like, you're in this brand new world and you're trying to figure out what's going on, but you knew what you had to do. And Starfield, I feel like, and I hope I'm not getting canceled for any of this, because it is I played it like 20, 30 hours already, and not planning on stopping anytime soon. But like, you're just kind of thrown in there, and you don't really have a goal. Even the thing that happens to you is just so vague. that I don't know how this is suddenly supposed to change your life and make you want to go find more things to do with it.
Yeah, right.
And so I think that's like I've been marinating on like what my problem is because I usually love Bethesda games. I feel like Skyrim kind of like you kind of
good.
hits the same road where you're just like you make up your character, you say who you are, and then you're just thrown in the action. But for some reason, it feels different, and I think it's because that opening, when you're woken up and you're a prisoner on this thing, now that's now a meme. Again, it's such a traumatic experience for you that you feel like that you have nothing else to do but explore. But Starfield, I don't know. I have to figure it out. I don't know. I don't know if I'm in love with anybody yet. Like in terms of the characters, like Barnett as a companion is really charismatic, and I love. I think her name is Stacy, but I'm still just like I'm not in love with this idea of Constellation yet, and I don't know if the worlds don't feel unique enough for me to want to like go and see everything. So this is now a Starfield podcast, and I apologize, but I've been trying to
one
get
of the
there.
One of the interesting things about those Bethesda games is like, it brings to life the idea that if you see something in the distance, you can go there, right?
Yeah.
Where this one I haven't had a chance to play it yet, mostly because I don't have time for it in my life right now.
I mean, neither do I.
I don't have time to get sucked in. But it's more like, you're going to a spaceship and flying off to a planet, which is a little different than, there's like a building over there. I want to see what's in there. You know what I mean? So I imagine it's a very different mode of.
Yeah, it's a fun game. I'm sure like once I put in 40, 60, 80 hours, I will be there. But I don't know. I feel like I'm going through the motions at this point. And that bums me out.
I am so out of touch with video games. I was literally just Googling what this game was. I'm still playing Dying Light 2.
Nice.
That I got like 2 years ago. And it's just like every once in a while I'll sit down for like 2 hours and play it, and then I won't get to play it for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean that truly was me. I have literally zero time to do anything anymore. And when I do have time, the last thing I want to do is sit in front of a computer again. Because I've been sitting in front of the computer for so long. But Starfield, it's a big Bethesda game. It's been super hyped up, and I loved Fallout, and I was excited to do Starfield. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, the visuals look fine, the gameplay is fine. I don't know. I think for me, the way Fallout started, Fallout 4 specifically, and the other ones are great too, but like you know what you want, you know who you are. And I think here you're just trying to, you spend like 20, 30 hours just trying to figure it out. And for me, a big part of these games, why I loved Mass Effect, why I loved any of these like big open world games like this, is that it's so much of it is about character and what you want and what you're doing and the connections that you're building. And I feel like, what am I doing?
You're not there yet. Yeah. And that is a long time not to be there. I mean, I totally understand where, after 20 hours, you hope you have that hook. So hopefully you get to it soon.
I feel like you described 3 major parts of any game, and you're like, it's fine. I just feel like you're not. I mean, if you're just thinking that it's just fine at 20 hours, I think you should let the dream die.
I mean, but these kind of games, you're supposed to put in like 200 hours. So
yeah, I mean, that is true.
Oh my God. I would love to be able to do that.
I feel your pain though.
Yeah. The reason I feel so pissy about it is because I have not played a video game in so long. And it's like I have very limited time. And so when I do play a video game, I want it to be like, Fallen Order, or Mass Effect.
You want it to really get its hooks in you, yeah.
And so I'm just like, I could have read a book, I could have read a comic book, I could have done anything else that is not sitting here going, eh.
I got like 20 hours into Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm like, I'm not feeling it. Matt and I have had this discussion. He's gonna, we're not gonna get into this too much, but just they pushed so much of like the building, the Minecraft stuff early on in the game that I wasn't feeling it, because that's not my kind of game. I'm more Mass Effect, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, story-driven games. But like I like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because they do give you that world where you can just kind of go do whatever you want. Just Tears of the Kingdom, the Minecraftiness of it, and like the first 15 to 20 hours where they were really pushing, like, you can build a mech, you can do this, you can do that. And I'm just like, I don't care. Just let me find the dragon tears. That's what's really driving me forward right now. So like the story elements are what really keep me going. And I guess to follow the icebreaker question with a little bit of a follow up is how do you find time to enjoy these sort of things when you yourself are a storyteller? Like, what do you look for in these moments of games where, or movies or comics where they just, you're looking for something that is not necessarily an inspiration, but a deviation from what you've been doing?
I don't know. I've just always loved other worlds and other stories. I've always loved reading. I mean, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with reading books. I mean, this morning, an ebook. There's a book from Thailand that's a girl love book that that is finally translated in English for the first time. And I like was supposed to work this morning, and instead I read the book, and it was it took me an hour and a half, 2 hours. I read the whole book. Like I'm just a big. I just like stories. I like experiences that are not my own. And and I've always been in love with fantasy and science fiction and just anything. Like, it was never like the CSIs or the NCISs or any of those procedural dramas that always hooked me. For me, like when growing up, it was Xena, it was Buffy, it was He-Man and She-Ra and those kind of stories that were just always told. Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, like those were the stories that really drove me. Babylon 5, like, so it was worlds that were so different from mine. I grew up in the inner city, Los Angeles, and there was nothing wrong with that world. I loved my neighborhood. My family worked really hard. I had I worked really hard, and but I loved the experience of being able to go to these different places, and that's what I'm looking for in video games. Like that. I think that's why I gravitate more toward RPGs and like a Call of Duty where you're just trying to kill each other. I just love a good story. And, Mass Effect is my favorite trilogy ever. I can play that over and over and over again. And I love that there's different choices that you can make. Even a shooter looter like Borderlands, where, you're just running around killing things, but the characters are just so fun and interesting. I just love a good character. And if you can transport me there and help me interact with people and have me send me on a different journey than I would experience here, that's all I'm asking for.
Now, do you find, as a writer yourself, do you find yourself like, I feel like if I was a writer, every time I came across a story, I'd go, well, I don't think they did it. Like, they should have done it this way. Do you find yourself more heavily critiquing than you think other people
Not
do?
while I'm watching and not while I'm reading. It's always after.
Okay.
Like, so for example,
you shoot up awake in the middle of the night. Like, wait a second.
Okay. So the only one that's happened to me recently was Blue Beetle. I loved Blue Beetle. Loved it. I thought it was super important. I wanted it to do well because I think we need the representation, and it was a charming, fun to watch movie. I watched it twice, but those opening 5 to 10 minutes, they did Susan Sarandon so wrong because the dialogue was absolutely terrible and super freaking lazy. And I remember sitting in the theater being taken completely out of the movie because like you open up, it's very cookie cutter, and then like here's the bad guy. He walks up to her and she's like, okay, here she comes off of the helicopter, bad guy Susan Sarandon. And she's like, well, how are we? He's like, it's been great. We're here digging this up since we found it 2 weeks ago. And I'm like,
yeah, as you know.
Yeah, she would know that, dude. Like, can you find
exposition dumps and walk and talks?
Can you find a more clever way to do that? And then they start walking towards the thing, and she's like, "Well, we better get to it because I've been waiting 15 years," and just like, that's the stuff that bugs me. Otherwise, I tend to just really enjoy the experience for the experience of it, and then afterwards, there's very few ones. I think it's just lazy exposition is what bugs me, or like. Yeah, Shadow and Bone was another one that I watched it on Netflix, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is driving me crazy." Because I could predict everything that was happening. No, I heard the books are amazing, and I'm excited to read them. But
sorry.
No, continue.
I was going to say exposition is one of those things you need, but there's ways to do it that is good.
I mean, it's hard.
And ways to do it that's bad.
I have to do a lot of exposition for Power Rangers. And so, and maybe this is why I'm so sensitive to it. Maybe I do a crap job myself. But it just like, Shadow and Bone. You could predict everything that was going to happen in this show. And I hate that. I hate being like, I mean, there's a formula to everything, right? You have to know, the formula of any movie, you're going to have the thing, then the thing is going to happen, then they're going to do, and you're going to have the fun and games and it's all going to look great. And then you're going to say like, hey, it's going super great. And then it all goes to crap. And then you're like, oh no, how it's going to, like, all is lost and what's going to happen. Like, the rises and falls, but like, when they get lazy and when you don't try to surprise people anymore, that's when I get annoyed about it. Yeah.
Sure.
So here's a trope question. We need to start talking about your line of work here, but I mean, this is kind of in your line of work. This is in your wheelhouse. You're a writer. My wife had me recently read the what is it called? A Court of Thorns and Roses books. I read the first two, and the first one is kind of like a Beauty and the Beast ripoff until you get to the last like 100 pages, and then it becomes this weird like Hunger Games, Harry Potter kind of story. And at like the page one of the last 100 pages, this person who's escorting the main character to the big confrontation with the bad guy is like, there's 3 things you cannot do. Don't make a deal with the bad guy, don't drink the wine, and don't say I love you to someone. And I'm like, she's doing all 3. She's doing all 3. You tell a main character not to do something, they're doing it. And like, thanks for that's not even foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So like, as a writer, how would you work around an instance like that, where instead of being like, you're dealing with Tommy in Power Rangers and Alpha says, Tommy, whatever you do, don't look Rita in the eye. Well, sure enough, you're basically saying we're going to create a circumstance where Tommy's going to have to look Rita in the eye.
I mean, I think it's one of those things where you have to manage twists and turns, right? I am a big, like, as despite me like going on this whole rant about how you could like predict everything in Shadow and Bone, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for the audience to know where you're going, as long as the journey to get there is good. Like, like any movie, you're going to watch a superhero movie, you don't go to watch the superhero lose. And if you do, you have to build a lot of trust that eventually they're going to win. I mean, that's why not Endgame, the one before that, Infinity War, was so powerful, right? Because they lost. And
yeah, right.
But you knew that the next one they were going to win, and like that, and so you had that trust that they'd been building in you for 10 years. One of the bigger things I think that was hard for me in Power Rangers was, it wasn't hard for me, but it was, I think, a good 2 differences. There was a narrative storyline where we have a new Green Ranger, and he gets captured by Rita Repulsa, and everybody knew we were going to do a Green Ranger 2.0, like an evil Green Ranger 2.0. Like, you saw that coming. I laid the tracks pretty clear for everybody. It did not bother me that people knew that we were doing that, because for me, it wasn't whether or not they knew that was coming. It was the journey to get there and how that pays off differently. A twist that nobody saw coming was when the Power Rangers go to a planet and all of a sudden they see somebody they don't expect to see, and they see Alpha 1 again, which is a robot that we haven't seen in 20 issues. That was a twist that nobody saw coming. And then the third kind of twist and turn was ones where I laid the tracks. Some people got it, some people didn't. Right. So, and that was the vessel, the identity of the vessel. Right. So there's a character called the Vessel that is meant to be the host for Dark Spectre when he gets through the morphing grid that Rita Repulsa has been grooming. And there's a whole big mystery of who this vessel is and what it's supposed to be. Spoiler alert, I'm so sorry if you haven't read the books, but the vessel is the body of Zordon. And I laid the tracks pretty significantly all the way run up to the reveal. I said, it was a warrior that a powerful warrior, one that could actually reach the Zeo crystal. I mentioned had to be a good warrior. I talked like at the opening, 101, the opening scene was the scene where Zordon loses his body. Like, there's a bunch of different things that made it very clear to me that it was going to be Zordon. And if you caught it, fantastic. That's what I want. People that are paying attention, that understand. And if you didn't, you got to be surprised. And it was oh, wow, that's not who I expected. And that for me, either one was a win-win. So I think it's one of those things where you have to be flexible with your twists and turns. You can't have them all happen the same way. There's that whole smoking gun theory where you introduce a gun, and in a movie you have to shoot it because people expect the gun to go off. It's how it goes off that becomes the thing, right? And so for me, that's how I see it. It's like if you know something is coming, then you have to make the journey interesting. The unpredictable part is how it happens, not that it's going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the whole Maggie shot Mr. Burns thing from The Simpsons.
Yes, exactly.
So like, as long as it's interesting and good, like you can't do a twist for the sake of doing a twist. Just so any listeners are aware, and so you guys are aware, John lost his internet. He says Comcast can eat a bag of dicks. So I don't disagree. Comcast, not a sponsor. Don't want it.
Melissa, we last talked to you. The episode we published about the Dead Lucky came out in July of last year, of 2022. And I think we probably talked to you a week or two before that came out. I forget the actual timeline there. So, the entirety of the Dead Lucky, has come out so far since then. I think the last issue that dropped was number 8, if I'm correct.
We're moving on to, I think 9 is dropping soon. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked to you before anyone in the public had gotten a hold of it. So I guess my first question to you about that is like, how do you feel about how, like, the reception? How do you feel about how, like, it's gone? Like, what are your vibes about where the book's at, like 8 issues in?
I mean, I'm so proud of it. I'm so excited about the second arc. I think the first arc, this is the first comic book I've ever done, ever. And to be able to do it for Image, to be able to do it as a creator-owned, to be able to do it in the Massiverse, which has such an incredible pedigree of writers like that, like I never would imagine to be able to have that kind of start. It was also terrifying because I've been a development executive forever, but I've been a professional writer for 2 years, and so I need a lot of help, and I'm really thankful that I got it. And Kyle has been absolutely instrumental, and Michael in helping me shape the story, and my girlfriend Sandra, who's consults from a military perspective, making sure I'm getting it right. I mean, I have to make sure that I'm crafting the story as narratively, as carefully as I can, while not losing sight of the original intent, which is, talking about PTSD and what that means, and not making it so much of a downer that people don't want to read it. So
Sure.
So that first arc, I really loved it because it was a lot happened in 6 issues, but we ended it in a really unexpected place where it was a closed arc. She technically lost, but she won, right? Because now we know that there's nothing that's going to stop her from getting in tomorrow and taking them down.
Yeah.
And that allowed us to have this really nice little complete arc for the first 6 issues. And then we get to go into Supermassive and allow her to have her connections there. And then that brings us back into issue 7, where we start a new arc, and it feels like a season 2. In that, we have a new setting. She's now in Morrow. We've got new players. We've got a little bit of different circumstances, but BB is still as broken as she ever was. And the connections that she made at the end of issue 1 with Maria and with Georgia, they're different now too, because they've encountered some trauma and some loss, and they're in different places than they were. And so I like to think that what you expect to happen in issue 6 and the way it starts out issue 7 is not what you expect, but that's a good thing, because it becomes more about BB and her trauma and the fact that she just isn't ready to let go. And we do that through introducing a character named Pyre, who is a character from her past that really rocks everything she thinks she knows. And in her isolated state, it's a really dangerous character for her to know. So I'm really excited about where to go, and I'm really excited about this arc.
Yeah, I admit I have not been able to read number 8 yet, admittedly, but I was able to catch up through number 7, and that definitely is like one of those last page cliffhangers where you're like, oh, it's on.
Yeah.
Things are about to get wild. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love
So
that. I love that. I'm
excited to get to 8.
The expectation of the reader too, because I don't think they saw it coming.
Yeah.
No, I'm still a little in denial. I'm kind of like, no, because we have our truth, and now there's a new truth, and which truth is the truth? And I'm like, I need the next issue.
But that's the whole point, right? It's this idea of, You think you know, you're stuck in your own world of what you think you know, and then all of a sudden everything changes. And what does it say about her if what she thinks she knows is not the truth?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like I think that's very definitional that may not be.
I mean, should we just say it? I feel weird talking around it.
That's up to you. That's up to you.
I mean, I think at this point, I feel like,
yeah, spoilers, I guess.
Yeah, issue 8's been out for a couple weeks, so I mean, yeah, if you want to,
we can just say it, I guess. So the Pyre is Ghost, who she thought died initially, but he did not die, and yet she still sees a version of Ghost. So what the hell is the version of Ghost that she's seeing if the real Ghost is standing in front of her? Very different than the guy she knew. So
yeah, I'm getting a little bit of like Darth Vader influenced vibes there, where Obi-Wan's like, well, I mean, from a certain point of view, Ghost is dead, or Vader or Anakin is dead, and Vader is now a new entity. So like Ghost is what BB is seeing, and Pyre is now essentially Vader.
Yeah.
But I maybe I'm reading too deep into that with Star Wars allegories.
Not to turn an incesty twist into it, but it feels almost like very Anakin and Vader, because Pyre very much wants that connection that they used to have. They had each other's backs. They were each other's support system. They were both, they're both minorities in the army. They're both pansexual. They like have had each other's. They have this life and death mentality where they have each other's back no matter what. And the reason why I was so intrigued by that is that I have friends who are soldiers, and they are friends with some horrible people, and like racist, horrible people. And I'm like, why are you friends with these people? I don't understand. And they're like, we were in the army together. They saved my life. Like at the end of the day, they got my back, I got theirs. And so it's this weird, like, I don't want to judge it. I'm not going to, because they're absolutely correct. This person would die for them, and they would die for this person. And they have, they have put themselves in harm's way and saved their lives in these combat situations. And, but when you get to the real world, it changes a little bit, because then there's other things involved that aren't life and death. And so it just gets complicated. And that's kind of the relationship I'm exploring with Pyre and BB, because when they were in the army, it was easy, but now they're not. And they both have different mentalities. And she thinks she has made zero connections in San Francisco, and she's losing the connections that she has. But it's she, because now here comes Pyre, who's telling her that things could be like, different. And he is handing her San Francisco and Morrow on a plate and says, let's tear it down just like you want. And she's like, at what cost? At what price? Now there's other factors involved. Now it's complicated. Do I want to go with my gut and just say, screw it, and do exactly what he's doing because it's easy? Or do I have to take these other people into account and know that if I do what he wants me to do, it's going to hurt a lot of people?
Yeah, that's that good, crunchy character stuff. And it's also a book about, a woman who like runs around in robots, which is, so it's just like, it's the best of all worlds.
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah, part of why I wanted John on here is because he is a military veteran. Unfortunately, his internet is not as reliable as mine, despite us living across the street from each other. I do wish we had his input with that feedback that you just gave us about. I don't want to speak for him, so I'm not going to. But I do know military veterans. I'm related to a few, and they've stated a lot of what you just did, where they're like, yeah, that person's a piece of shit, but we went through that shit together, and now like I know I have a support system there, even though they may not be morally on the same wavelength as I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this the last time we talked, and again, I'm also, I've never been in the military. I've, a lot of people we grew up with, John included, are people that through various ways went through the military. But one of the things that really clicked with me when reading The Dead Lucky, what I've read of it to date, is that a lot of that stuff rings true with like the things that they have told me, like their experiences they've relayed to me. So, I know that's not worth much coming from someone who has not experienced it, but it feels very authentic.
Yeah, I haven't either. I haven't either, and
yeah.
I'm fully candid about that. I'm not a soldier, and I don't have that mentality. But I think that's why it's important for us to talk about this stuff, because you and I, we don't have that experience, but these other people do. And as long as we aren't open about those experiences and these conflicts and complications, we're never going to really understand where they're coming from. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have with veterans. Not the biggest challenge. There's a lot of challenges veterans face when they come in, but I think one of the hardest things for them to do is that they feel very isolated and they feel very alone, because nobody but the people that they went through stuff together are going to understand what they went through. And they come home with their families and their partners and their loved ones and their children, and they just don't get it. And all, I can look at a person and be like, that guy's a racist piece of crap. Like, why are you even spending time with this person? Or why do you keep making excuses for this person? And until you sit there and understand, like, no, this person saved my life and almost got killed or got tortured because of me. How do you throw that connection away? It's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's no black and white. Everything's shades of gray.
Yeah. So what I'm hoping is a little bit of a shade of gray. Looking at the previews world FOCs for August, our friend of the show, Marty from Panels to Panels, he mentioned and brought to my attention that Image now lists Dead Lucky for the October issue, number 10, is of 12. So when we last spoke last year, you had said you'd feel lucky if you were able to tell your 6-issue story with BB. And obviously you've gotten to expand it into further issues. Is 12 the cutoff at this time for BB, or is that just...
Why don't we stay tuned at this point?
Stay tuned.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
I will say if it was 12 issues, I'd be lucky to have them. And yeah, I do feel like I could tell that narrative in 12 issues. Is it 12 issues? I can't say right now.
Okay. Yeah, sure. We don't want to get you in trouble.
Fair enough. So with these issues, with going into such depth of trying to be authentic with the military experience as well, how do you convey that to your creative team with your artists, your colorists, and everything? Maybe the coloring isn't necessarily as in depth, like they see the image and they go, I can do this with that.
Yeah, it's a lot of reference images and a lot of detail in the scripts. A lot of detail. And I honestly don't think I even get it right all the time, because sometimes Sandra will come in and be like, that's wrong. And I'll be like, I'm sorry. Okay. But I mean, you only do what you can, right? And so I'm just hoping I do enough that I don't break, throw people out of the story. That's my hope.
No, that's all I can do, it seems. From my perspective, it seems like.
Yeah. And French isn't a soldier either, so he can only go by what he sees. So.
Right.
He's Italian.
All right. Oh man, my head is swimming from all this like depth that we've been going into, and
I'm sorry.
No,
that's good.
It's a good depth, but it's throwing me off my. I usually like to be a little more free flowing, and now I'm just like, but we in these and John, I feel bad John's not here, because now I'm feeling guilty about it too.
Let's pivot over to, we could maybe always circle back, but something I'm curious about, that I'm always curious about. You are writing a miniseries, Spider-Gwen Smash, that starts in December. How did that come about? I'm always curious. Sometimes you hear, oh, I got this gig because Marvel was soliciting pitches, or I went to them. Like, did somebody approach you, or did you?
No, I am a lucky person. I was approached by a wonderful editor called Sarah Bernstead to do Women of Marvel and contribute a story into that, an anthology called.
I did not know that. Oh,
yeah, and it was called Starling Rescue, and I wrote an America Chavez and Kate Bishop adventure. It was a girls' night out gone terribly wrong. It was 8 pages.
Oh, great! I missed that issue.
Yeah, it was fun. It was 8 pages. Had a blast doing it, and if that was all I ever did for Marvel, I would have been happy, because I got to write America Chavez and Kate Bishop, and those two I have loved forever. But in doing that, apparently they had a good experience with me and they liked me. And so I was reached out to by another editor who read the story and liked it. And her name was Ellie Pyle, and an associate editor called M.R. Daniels. And they said, would you be interested in doing an Echo miniseries for Marvel Voices Infinity? So the Infinity app, the Marvel Unlimited app, has webcomics that are exclusive to the app. And so I did a 6-issue or 6-issue miniseries for Marvel Voices for them. Really proud of that one. It's still ongoing, but if you have the Marvel Unlimited app, please check it out. I worked really hard on it. I actually spoke to a friend of mine who was a Kiowa tribesman and talked to him about his tribe and about some concerns that he had about Native American issues. And I got to really just thread that into the story a little bit. And so it's about Echo going back to the res, which is a reservation that is for displaced people, displaced tribes, people that don't know their tribes, and is brought into another adventure on the res, and meets a woman who was taken away from her family, from her Kiowa parents at a very young age, and they were arrested at a traffic stop, and she was adopted by a white family and then never got to see them again. And so she wants to turn back time and change that. And Echo is stuck with the moral question of whether or not she should let that happen. And especially given that her father was taken from her at a very young age as well. So it's a very character focused story, and we kind of go into the true story of a lot of Native American children who were taken away from their families, and a lot of those mothers were forcibly sterilized, and they had to pass an act in like the 70s to stop it from happening, and it was called one of the most ignored laws in history. So it was so interesting, and to learn about it and hear about it. I'm not Native American, but I do have that kind of blood. I don't know what kind, but I've been told by my grandfather that I do. So I'm not trying to claim it, but I do feel a responsibility to make sure I tell that story correctly. So I got to tell that story with them. Completely different experience, a lot of fun, and apparently they liked working with me, and so they offered me a Spider-Gwen miniseries, and so that's what we're working on now.
Great. Yeah. I mean,
in print.
Yes. Yeah.
So it feels like I'm leveling up a little bit each time. We'll see.
I did have a question about the Spider-Gwen comic, because the description on the Marvel page from the San Diego Comic-Con announcement, it says it's a new twist on the characters, essentially, or like new takes on old characters. So could this kind of be like a soft reboot of Gwen? I think Gwen's from Earth 65.
So what's going on? It's the Gwen we always know and love, but it is Gwen in her home dimension, which is Earth 65. And the great thing about Earth 65 is that there's not a lot, hasn't been really explored all that much yet. So there are characters that you might know very, very well that maybe have not, their incarnations have not shown up in Earth 65 up until this point. A lot of times the bad guys are not really very cool in Earth 65. They're kind of like rejects, leftovers. And that's not to say that the ones that you're seeing in the Amazing miniseries, there's a really amazing version of Silk in there, and Sue Storm, and some really cool people. But for the most part, it's not like 616, where it has like everybody and he's got Avengers. Like, she has self-proclaimed that her Earth 65 is pretty lame when it comes to superheroes and supervillains. She's like fighting bodega bandits. She's not fighting like big guys, which is why you see her constantly leaving and going like doing Spider-Verse stuff other places. It's hard for her to want to stick around. And so the whole purpose of this miniseries is she can't leave. It's Earth 65. She's stuck there because she's going on tour with the Mary Janes. And so we get to see different incarnations of iconic characters. And so the ones I can probably reveal at this point are Dazzler. We get to see that version of Dazzler, and Lila Chini's in there, and some other ones that are surprising and fun. And we'll see who else you see.
Dazzler definitely makes sense given the subject matter.
I'm having so much fun with her. Yeah.
And Lila Cheney, are you like an old school X-Men head, or you just?
She's so fun.
Yeah,
there were other characters I pitched. I will say that like Marvel had very much had requests. And so it was a conversation back and forth. I had pitched a different take a little bit, and then they came back and were like, "We love this, but we want you to do things with that." And so it became
let's just do a little
it's always a conversation, especially in a licensed book. And so we ended up with Dazzler and Lila Cheney and some other characters. And I can't say I feel bad about it. Like I love her. She's so OP and so interesting and so fun. And I don't feel like she's been utilized super well lately. Not that, people haven't done an amazing work, but like I think she was just killed in Hellfire Gala, wasn't she? Like the last time we saw her, she was like
a lot of people were killed.
so I'm having fun with her, and I'm having fun with this take of her, which is like a Gaga, Britney Spears-esque kind of like pop diva.
Wonderful.
That's just like
Great.
a badass.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think about something like that where I'm not a writer, but if it's me, I feel like I would be like terrified of writing a character who at this point has now been in like 2 of the best superhero movies ever made. Okay, that was my question. Yeah, how do you deal with that?
I mean,
so
that characterization of Gwen is so unique and so well executed that I just feel like you can't really touch it, right? That is its own thing. You kind of just have to let it live. And I'm trying not. I'm not thinking about that Gwen. The only thing that I took about that Gwen was that opening sequence of Into the Spider-Verse where she's playing the drums, and you just see how much she needs it. And how much of her emotion is pouring out in those drums, and we're really exploring her relationship with music in this miniseries, and that's what I took from that series. It is terrifying because everybody I talk to who finds out I'm doing Spider-Gwen's like, "Oh, my kid loves Spider-Gwen; she's obsessed," and I'm just like, "Oh my god, okay." But I loved Spider-Gwen. I loved that first initial run of Spider-Gwen when Peter Parker died and you saw like all this crazy thing happen. Like, these things happen to her and just like everything, like it's just her terrible, no bad, no good week. Like that was just such an amazing. And so that's kind of, she's so emotionally constipated. And that's the Gwen that I'm running with.
I was going to ask if there was going to be any Jason Latour influences or even just like acknowledgments of taking it from there. Cause I feel like the Spider-Gwen books kind of derailed, for lack of a better word, pretty quickly. Like I think Latour had a really good run.
Yeah.
And then it, like you said, like they realized 65 wasn't the most interesting Earth that had been created. So they just kind of kept universe jumping her.
Yeah.
So I do think that the Latour stuff as a foundation is still really solid.
I mean, I take everything, even the runs that people might not like. I think there's always something really cool to have to take from those characters, and
it's all part of the tapestry,
it's all part of the tapestry. It's all part of what makes the character. And I think the best kind of story is when you're doing these stories and you're taking characters in. And I learned this on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. You don't want to dishonor anything that has come before you. You want to honor everything that every writer has put into these books because they care about these characters and they've each wanted to tell their own stories. And it would be very rude of me to go be like, that didn't happen. Screw that. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
I'd rather take what they did, and if I could find some opportunities to plug some holes, I will absolutely take them, even if it's just like a sentence or two, to be like, hey, remember that thing that like they never talked about again? Guess what? Here it is again. I promise nobody forgot. It's here. I read about it and I remembered. Like that's what I will do. I'm not going to dishonor what anybody's ever done. I want to take what everybody's done, and I want to make it part of who this character is, because it is, that character has scars and things that have happened to them that have affected them, and I don't want that to feel like it didn't matter. Gwen is such a complicated character because she doesn't have an ongoing right now. She has a bunch of miniseries, which means a bunch of many different people have touched her, and so that has proved a little challenging. But I don't think it's impossible, and I think that she's remained pretty steadfast as far as who she is, and the people around her have as well. I really loved this version of Mary Jane. And that relationship, and I love her father. Like there's consistencies that allow you to really enrich this world, and I'm having a blast enriching Earth 65. and just making it more of her home that she will feel a little more comfortable in, as opposed to the need to constantly run off and do her own thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit it was not a book that was totally on my radar until we were talking about setting up this interview, and between like, you know, everything we've talked about and just reading about, you know, the pitch, I'm sold. I think.
I hope you like it. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's terrifying for me because Marvel is such a bigger platform.
Yeah, I bet. I mean,
and I was almost crucified for my Women of Marvel story because somebody read something that was out of context and like put the panel on a website.
That's the worst.
Yeah,
you know,
it was I thank God. Like I was terrified that people were gonna find out. They're like, somebody was like, "Who wrote this?" And I was like, "Not me." It was so Miles Morales makes an appearance at the end of it, and Miles Morales is Spider-Man, and Kate Bishop is Hawkeye, and and they're going to find starlings, which are, you know, the girls that America Chavez was raised with, and they find a starling, but it is not the Starlings. It is Starling, who is Miles Morales' girlfriend. And and so Kate makes a joke about how they need to be more original with their names. And because he shows up and she's like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. We need to be more original with our names. And like somebody posted just that panel without any other context and said like, well, fuck Kate Bishop. And people just lost their minds. And they're like, what the hell? That's like, she's Hawkeye. How she has no room to talk? I'm like, that's the point. That's the joke.
As someone who has been an ardent defender of the currently ongoing Amazing Spider-Man run, which has been very controversial.
Yeah.
All I can say is, you know, the takes out there on the internet are wild.
I mean, truly, I was watching that with bated breath, being like, they're going to find out who wrote this and they're going to come after me.
Yep.
And I'm just going to have to ignore it. But also, like, it's everything in me is going to be like, that's the point. Read. It's 8 pages, man. Yep. It's not going to take a lot of time. Just read the book. I promise. Like, reading comprehension is there. The point is that they all have the same names.
Story than this one panel you saw online.
Well, and thankfully, a lot of people did read the story and were like, yeah, read the story. Like, that's the point. Like, that whole point is that going after somebody that has the same name, it's like as somebody else, and that she has the same name. She even mentions that Clint and her are constantly confused because they have the same name. So,
well, I'm sorry you had to deal with the gaping wound on the internet that is.
I think I didn't have to because they didn't find me. I had to go looking for that. But if they had.
Even to stare in the face of it is to court madness.
And those are the same people that get mad that in a children's show, because they can't have 2 Spider-Men for marketing purposes, they would probably get mad to find out that Miles Morales is called Spin in Spidey and His Amazing Friends on Disney Junior.
Oh my gosh.
I do think that's a worse name.
It's not the best name.
No, and I'm not defending that. I'm just saying they would
sounds
probably
like you are, and I think you should be canceled.
Yeah, we're gonna clip this and put it.
I'll make it a headliner. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I'll put it on TikTok. So, speaking of following a legacy in Mighty Morphin, and you have a history with Saban Brands before you became the writer for this fantastic comic, which, like, I feel like it has gone from amazing writer to amazing writer to amazing writer to amazing writer.
It's a credit to the editors who find these amazing writers and cultivate them. But yes, continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So with Darkest Hour, I may be forgetting if Ryan had a big event, but this feels like the second big event for the Mighty Morphin brand since it came back as a comic in I believe 2015. Can you at least tell us like how many issues are planned as of right now for Darkest Hour?
Yeah.
And like a little bit of the inspiration behind Darkest Hour.
Yeah. So Brian had events, they just weren't anniversary events because they weren't anniversary seasons, right? He had the Altarian War, he had the Charged 100,
That's
he
right.
had Necessary Evils. We had some great events. They were all fantastic. Shattered Grid was the 25th anniversary event, which was a little different. And then this is the Darkest Hour, which is the 30th anniversary event. So it is scheduled to last for a year. So it will wrap up in 22. 122. And it is definitely, it is it is meant to take everything that has come before it and just make it all explode. That is, I'm in a really weird and special position in that I was an executive on the books when they first started, so I feel very proprietary about those storylines, even though they weren't written by me. I was being pitched them and discussed them, and that's how I got to know Kyle and how I got to know Ryan, and I was in rooms arguing with them and arguing with Daphne and hearing those pitches and reading every script and seeing every layout. So I feel very connected to those stories, and so being able to pay them off, or just take what they've done and put them together in a different way has been very special to me. I don't want to say that this is anything close to Shattered Grid because that was a perfect event. I'm just trying to do the best I can, and as somebody that loves Power Rangers, I'm really having a blast putting it together in my own way.
Yeah, I can't compliment the Mighty Morphin, the Power Rangers, like everything Kyle and Ryan did, like collaboratively and like with the editors and everyone leading up into and through Shattered Grid, beyond, and what you've done, what Matt did with his quick little run. Like this has just been every month. Looking forward to this book is a Saturday morning for me. Like it's just it hit. I think Kyle said it when he first came out with the book, is that this isn't a retelling of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It's not necessarily the same characters. It's how you feel about them looking back at them. Yeah. And I think that's a perfect way of putting it. And you guys have continued that legacy through, where these guys, they feel like the characters we know, but they have grown a little bit with us through these 30 years.
Yeah, I can only do what I can, right? And I'm taking these really iconic characters and they're the characters as they live in my head. And I just, to keep myself from going completely crazy, I just always have to remember that I'm not going to please everybody and that I have to just stay with my own truth and my own love of the characters. And hopefully enough people will follow them. And at least grant me the grace to do it. But I have very, very specific characterizations for these people. They may not be exactly what people expected. Like Billy gets really violent these last couple of issues. For me, there's absolutely a good reason why. But if you have no context for the last 100 issues, and all of a sudden you see Billy trying to like straight up kill somebody, you're just like, what the hell? That's not Billy. So it really just it depends on the circumstances of the character, I think.
Yeah, I saw that panel on Twitter, and I have some thoughts I would like to share with you.
But yeah, no, it's been fantastic. I've loved this. 112 issues has just been more phenomenal, to coin a phrase. And it just I had another. How much fun is it dealing with the Omega Rangers?
I mean, I love those characters. It's a lot of characters though, and that's been hard.
That was going to be my follow-up, is how do you balance having essentially, what would it be, 11 Rangers, 12 Rangers?
I just do arcs
in a book.
I do arcs. That's all I can do. I give everybody little bits and little arcs in this. They go back and forth, and then they'll go to the background a little bit, and then they'll come back and they'll have their little moments. And so I try to keep the journey in mind. But really it's a matter of just making sure I'm keeping track of everybody, where they're going, and making sure that even if that they're not where they started. I think the ones that have probably suffered the most, that have had the least amount of attention paid to them, are Adam and Rocky, and I feel bad about that. I have plans for them, definitely, but it's hard. There's a lot of characters. There's Omega Rangers, there's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, there's Matt, there's Bulk, there's Skull, there's Jason, there's Zordon, there's Rita, there's Zed, there's the Vessel, there's Dark Spectre, there's like all these, and that's not including the Draken Rangers and the Hyperforce Rangers and the Anniversary Rangers that show up, and you don't want them to show up for no reason, and so it's hard. There's Grace, there's Torona, there's like all these different characters that you have to serve and provide, make sure that they're satisfying narratively, and so Billy's a perfect example. Billy didn't have a lot to do in the first 10 issues. And then, we lost Grace in 110, and that has kind of kicked off his character growth, or his character story. Because now suddenly he's got a lot of responsibility that he didn't have before. and he's dealing with the grief of a mentor, the grief of losing a mentor. That was really special to him.
I did get a text from John just a little bit ago. It's all in caps because I said, hey, it looks like you're not getting your internet back. Is there anything you want us to ask me? In all caps, it says, OMG, ask her why there has not been an explanation about the powers. Like, why is she suddenly electric? And I don't know if you listened to our Matt Groom episode, but Matt's like, you can ask these questions, but there might not be an answer.
I think it's very clear that he has not read the latest issue, because we explain where the powers come from in that issue.
You are being called out. You're not even here to defend yourself. I admitted I didn't read it.
There's a flashback in there's a flashback in issue 9. We're getting there. How's that?
And then I did ask if he had any kind of reaction or comments about the representation of the military experience. He did say that it seemed like you had
consultant.
Thank you. My brain work. It seemed like you had a consultant, a military consultant to work with you. And I was like, yeah, her girlfriend is a veteran who works with her. And he's like, well, they've been doing really great work
I will
together.
let her know. Thank you. She also does the recipes at the end of the book too.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask about that actually, because I know that there's one in every issue, and I was curious if those were all, original.
They are all original. I tell her, I'm like, can I get a recipe for this issue? She's like, okay, when do you need it? And then she'll go through.
Does she concoct it on demand, or are they like old family recipes?
No, she does it on demand. She's very good at it.
Wow.
Because they're all fusion. They're all Chinese Mexican recipes,
Hold on
she's
tight.
all
Hold
Chinese.
on tight.
So
I admit I have not tried any, but they all seem chef's kiss.
Thank you.
Great.
With the Massive Verse, where would you like to see BB go within this universe? Like, obviously, the main idea of the Massive Verse is all these books exist within their own little corner, and you don't have to read 6 other books to know what's happening in one book. So if you had a dream list of where BB could go within this universe, or like collaborations that you could make within her little corner of the universe, what would you like to see happen without going too deep into spoilers?
I'd like her to find some peace. That would be definitely nice. I don't think she has to stop doing what she's doing, and I don't think you have to be a superhero. You have to be broken to be a superhero, but I definitely would love that, to find a little bit more of a connection. Because right now she's kind of sabotaging everyone she has. I'd love to see her talk to Dylan a little bit more, because I think her and Dylan and Rogue Sun have a lot in common, and they both have a lot of trauma, and I think she could probably help him a little bit. He's kind of searching for an older figure, and I think she'd gravitate to that kind of a broken kid that could help. I also think she'd fall absolutely in love with Radiant Red.
Mm-hmm.
She might want to kick the crap out of Marshall, but she would love Radiant Red.
Well, that's why we like that guy, is because he kind of wants you. Well, how about this? Before we let you go, is there anything that you would like to, any projects you want to tease, any developments in your books, like any hints you want to give us for Dead Lucky, for Spider-Gwen, for Power Rangers, any morsels you want to leave people with?
No, I'm working on some really exciting, fun stuff, and I can't talk about it yet, but hopefully by New York Comic Con I can. I will just say that.
Great. Well, we will keep an ear out. It's one of those things where, and part of this is because, as you mentioned, Dead Lucky is your first comics work, but it feels like after I was aware of you as a writer, I start seeing you everywhere. It's like you buy a red car and suddenly you see red cars everywhere. Like, I'm like, oh, that project looks interesting. Oh, it's Melissa Flores. I've talked to her. I'm
trying. Until you guys get tired of me, you'll keep seeing me.
Well, at least from where I'm sitting, it's working. Because so far, I have not read everything you've written, but what I have read is A+. Love it.
Agreed.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I can only keep saying that we appreciate the stories you're telling and the collaborations you've been doing, because we wouldn't be here talking if it weren't for that, and also just your generosity with your time. As I mentioned earlier, you put out a tweet about how you have deadlines, so we'll let you get to your Indian food, and we'll we'll let you get back to work.
It was an absolute
or
pleasure.
Starfield, whichever you feel inclined to do.
I love talking to you guys every time. You guys always ask such interesting questions. And honestly, I go away from it always thinking about what we talked about. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I'm sure my scripts will be better for it this week.
Well, hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget, this is the last Massiveverse episode that will be coming out before the end of the Kickstarter for Inferno Girl Red Book 2. So please back that book if you have not already. And Melissa, again, thank you so much. If you're not subscribed to if you're not subscribed to The Dead Lucky, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Spider-Gwen on tour begins in December. Follow that and get on that Melissa Flores hype train. Please join us on Discord, follow our social medias. Melissa, do you want to let everyone know where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, I am on Twitter. I just can't call it the other thing.
I refuse.
I call it Lonnie's website because it's going to crash and burn.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram, though not as much recently because I've just been like buried in stuff. But you can always find me at Misty_Flores on both. Facebook is just for friends and family. So if you send me a friend request and I don't respond, it's only because all you're going to get is all my cousins in Mexico. It's not, you're not getting anything special on that website. You're going to get most of it on Instagram. So.
All right. Well, thanks again, Matt. Thank you for your time. John, I know you were only here for like 5 seconds and made 2 comments, but I appreciate you making the effort. And everyone, thanks again. Give the Massiveverse your love as you can, and take care. And we'll see you next week, where we will either be talking to Ryan Parrott or Kyle Higgins, depending on availability.